AI. New study published on Monday, February 9th in the HBR, Harvard Business Review, suggesting that AI tools intensify work but do not reduce it. Two UC Berkeley researchers spent 8 months embedded at a 200-person tech company. So this is one company's experience. What they found, employees who use AI worked at a faster pace, took a broader scope of tasks, and extended work into more hours of the day. Workers reported feeling more productive, but they also felt a little more stress and burnout. Sachs, your hot take here, your quick take on this study. Obviously, it's just one company, but it does track, I think, some of my experiences.
All right. Well, a few points here. Number one, as you may recall on the prediction show for this year, my most contrarian belief is that AI would increase demand for knowledge workers, not put them out of business. And I think you see in this UC Berkeley study, the reason why that might be the case is because the employees who use these tools, like you said, they worked faster. They took on a broader scope of tasks. They actually ended up working more hours in the day. So they did more work, not less, and even more effort rather than less, not because they were required to, but just because they were more motivated. And I think they were more motivated because their work was getting up-leveled, right? They're kind of able to offload more menial tasks to AI, and it made their work more purposeful and meaningful. So I think we're kind of moving from what some people, I think maybe Jensen has called task-based jobs to purpose-based jobs. And I think a key skill of employees is going to be the ability to structure work for themselves and their AI agents. And the employees who can do that are going to be far more productive than those who can.
Numbers behind it briefly. We, with our agents, hit $300 a day per agent using the Claude API, like instantly. And that was like doing maybe 10 or 20%. That's $100,000 a year per agent.
We're getting to a place where we have to basically now say, what is the token budget that we're willing to give our best devs? And then if you aggregate it across all people, you can clearly see a trend where you're like, well, hold on a second. Now they need to be at least 2x as productive as another employee. That is actively happening inside my business because otherwise I'll run out of money.
Yeah, this is a very interesting trend that you're not going to hear anybody else talk about. But when do tokens outpace the salary of the employee? Because you're about to hit it. I'm about to hit it.
I think superstar developers are already there.
Yeah.
I think the rank and file is probably 10, 20% max. More than likely, they're spending a few thousand. The average non-technical employee is probably in the hundreds to low thousands. But to your point, the trend is what matters.
Yeah.
So unless we have some gigantic leap forward in generating output tokens at 1/10 the cost of what they are today, which I suspect we will have. So bear with everybody for a while because I think Nvidia and Grok and Google and AMD, they're all incentivized to massively ramp up the energy density and massively push down the token cost. That's going to happen, but it doesn't change the trend.
You name-checked Grok, I think, with some admiration a second ago. I mean, like when Nvidia acquired Grok, Jensen Huang's view was that they were struggling to find their place in the world, in the market. And for what it's worth, Sarah Brasser, you name-checked as well, filed confidentially for IPO yesterday. Why might you succeed where Grok had to go to Nvidia, and I guess they're working on something, and the public markets, are needed for capital going forward?
Yeah, so I would say this is historically, the market has been won by the HBM-based players. That's the Google, Amazon, Nvidia, and not by Grok and Cerebras. SRAM-only chips are very good for latency, but when you want to run very long context models, you run out of memory capacity. SRAM is too small. Right. It's fast, but too small. Really, the hybrid of doing weights in SRAM, so you get the low latency, as well as having the HBM for very long context support is, we believe that's what enables the low latency without all of the compromises that you would get otherwise.
Rainer Pope, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say, very happy to be here, and thank you. One of the really what it reflects is, on the one hand, very strong confidence from some of our lead investors in the product. This is from Jane Street and Situational Awareness have led our round. Very strong on Jane Street's sides. They're absolute technical experts. They understand the kind of product we're doing. And then Situational Awareness, that's Leopold Aschenbrenner's fund. He wrote the book on AGI, and he really understands where this whole space is going. What we are looking to do with this product and with this money. Firstly, I would say the demand for LLM compute is just insatiable. Right. All of the frontier labs are looking at where this space is going, and they're all concerned, I'm going to run out of silicon. I won't be able to serve all the demand I've got. Right. So our goal overall has been to make the highest throughput per square millimeter of silicon that any product has.
This is about computational density.
That's right.
That's right. And so you guys are basically saying throughput in terms of flops per millimeter squared, this is something you can own. What was the breakthrough? What is it that you're so good at to achieve this?
Yeah, so there's really a combination of two things. If you look at the products in the market previously, there's been the HBM-based family, which is Nvidia, Google, Amazon, and then there's been the SRAM-based family.
And you are SRAM?
We are both, actually, uniquely. So it's kind of taking two good ideas and putting them together. It is possible to do both very high throughput, as you get from HBM, but also very low latency, as you get from SRAM, and do that in the same product. What it gives you is actually a product that is better than any other product in the market at throughput. This is exactly the flops per square millimeter that you described, while also matching some of the best, like the Cerebras and the Grok, at latency.
Let's talk about how quickly people can start deploying this, Rainer, because what your aim is to complete the final design this year. You hope to start manufacturing, shipping even in 2027. Who do you need to partner with on that? How do you expect to be manufacturing here in the US or abroad?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few big parts of the supply chain, and this is common for us as well as many other semiconductor firms in this space. Really, you need logic wafers, memory wafers, which is HBM, and then you need rack build-outs. And so those are the big parts of our supply chain. TSMC is well recognized as the best provider of logic wafers, and then the memory wafers, there's the big three, which are SK Hynix, Samsung, and Micron, and then there's a whole range of providers across the rack and manufacturing side. One of the big things that if you want to manufacture in very large volumes, we hear about these multi-gigawatt deals that are coming out. These require billions of dollars of manufacturing, and then actually setting up hundreds of millions of dollars put into setting up supply chains in advance of delivering that. And so that's a big part of what we're excited to be able to do now. You
left Google in 2022. And the goal was creating a better chip from scratch, Rainer. But have you been impressed by the leaps that TPU has taken? It seems to have impressed the market. What is it that you felt wasn't at Google for you that you now can build better?
Yeah, so I think what is really required is if you want to absolutely nail the LLM workload, you have to be willing to break compatibility with previous chips. And so one of the strong guarantees you see all of the existing players providing is you can take a program that was written on my previous generation chip or my generation of chips 5 years ago, and it will run on my next generation chip. And so a lot of what that means is there are constraints on my chip has to support all of the previous number formats I supported. It has to support all of the different programming model, the way I communicate between cores on the chip. All of those have to be the same as each other. We felt that it would be necessary, if you really want to just absolutely nail this workload without regards for backwards compatibility or other workloads or anything like that, you need to something of a blank slate design is required. For us, this means very large matrices, very low precision support, and then, in fact, an ability to split your very large systolic array into small pieces.
Well, Charles, great to see you. And there is some selling that is nuts. And I'll tell you, I think the biggest problem is we have a throwing out the baby with the bathwater moment. Not all software will be eaten by SaaS, and not all software will be eaten by AI. And not all software will survive the AI inflection. I want to be really clear about that, because some companies came out over the last 3 or 4 years with features that became publicly traded companies that are now at risk. I look at companies that are in project management tools. I look at some of the design-only platforms or companies that have created software that just does expenses. I'm worried about these companies. But on the other end, there's enterprise software like SAP, Oracle, ServiceNow, Salesforce. These are core applications that run entire companies' businesses. They have all the proprietary data. They have all the rules. They're able to transact across borders in different countries with different regulatory and different compliance, Charles. These are incredibly complicated things. I mean, today, Anthropic, which was going to take out all of cybersecurity, had 24,000 Chinese bots attacking its software. And with its new AI security software, it wasn't able to stop it. So this idea that it's going to just be overnight, everything gets replaced, Charles, I just think you're right in your paraphrasing. It's nuts.
It is. I saw the CEO of CrowdStrike actually posed a question to Claude whether or not, AI was going to take out cybersecurity. And Claude essentially said, no, that's not going to happen. So what's happening with this market? CrowdStrike's down 11% right now.
The headlines sometimes write themselves. I just gave you that example with Anthropic. Sometimes these are the pullbacks that create the opportunities for investors. CrowdStrike, Palo Alto Network, Cloudflare, these companies are fundamental. They've built super platforms and applications that truly do allow enterprises to secure critical data. And if anyone is paying attention to what agents, for instance, are doing, is agents are basically nameless, faceless, badgeless employees that have access to all kinds of systems. The headlines, I can't even make these up, Charles. I read one today, I believe it was a Meta Labs safety employee that gave all of its email access to OpenClaw, and suddenly OpenClaw started in its production email box deleting all of her emails. And she kind of called out and said, oops, my bad. But the bottom line is that these tools are not ready for prime time. Businesses operate, they report to the street. They take really critical customer data and transact with these systems. They are going to be collaborators. Anthropic sitting on top of Salesforce or ServiceNow, that's powerful. Anthropic running your entire business. I talk to CIOs every single day. I don't know a single CIO of the serious company that is looking at vibe coding out the critical applications that run their business. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves here, and we're also throwing the baby out with the bathwater, not looking at all SaaS being the same.
Right.
And really, there are only a few companies that could potentially be completely displaced, and even that will take some time.